the first humans arrived on Mars in 2087. By 2126, no one could remember Earth as their home anymore. The planet had been transformed, not into a mirror of Earth, but into something entirely new, something that existed only in the minds of those who had never walked under open skies. The Martian colonies stretched across 3 continents, connected by underground highways that hummed with the sound of transportation pods carrying supplies, personnel, and the dreams of a generation born beneath a rust-colored sky. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood at the observation deck of Research Station Meridiani, staring out at the landscape that had consumed the last 4 decades of her life. The canyon walls of Valles Marineris rose in jagged formations beyond the reinforced transparent aluminum barrier, their shadows stretching impossibly long in the pale Martian sunlight. She was 53 years old, had spent 37 of those years studying the planet's geological history, and had just made a discovery that would rewrite everything humanity thought it knew about Mars. Behind her, the main laboratory hummed with the soft sounds of equipment running continuous analyses. The walls were lined with screens displaying real-time data from drilling operations 17 kilometers beneath the surface, where her team had been excavating for the past 18 months. They had gone deeper than anyone had gone before, past the ice layers, past the ancient sediment deposits, into the bedrock that had remained undisturbed since Mars lost its magnetic field billions of years ago. What they found there changed everything. In the core samples extracted from the deepest bore, there were structures, crystalline formations that shouldn't exist according to any geological model humanity had ever developed. They weren't minerals in the traditional sense. They were organized, patterned, arranged with a precision that suggested intention. Elena's hands trembled slightly as she pulled up the latest spectroscopic analysis on her personal data tablet. The composition was unlike anything in the periodic table of known elements, or rather, it was composed of known elements arranged in configurations that defied explanation. Carbon, silicon, iron, and trace amounts of heavier metals, all bonded in a lattice structure that suggested properties no one had predicted. The implications were staggering. If these structures were what she thought they were, if her preliminary hypothesis held even a fraction of truth, then Mars had never been the dead planet everyone assumed. Something had lived here, something had built things, something had engineered the very ground beneath their feet. Subscribe and hit the like button to stay with us as we uncover the secrets that will reshape our understanding of Mars and our place in the universe. The message arrived at the Colonial Administration Center in Olympus City within hours. Elena had not wanted to alert anyone before she had concrete data, but protocol demanded immediate notification of any discovery with implications for colonial security or scientific governance. Director James Chen read the preliminary report 3 times, each time with increasing disbelief. The structures Elena's team had found were not random geological formations. They exhibited mathematical properties consistent with artificial construction. The lattice patterns repeated at multiple scales, suggesting a fractal organization. In nature, fractals appeared in coastlines, in crystals, in the branching of rivers, but this was different. This was controlled, deliberate, engineered down to molecular precision. By the next morning, Elena's laboratory had become the nexus of a rapidly expanding investigation. Additional teams from the other major research stations were being mobilized. Specialists in microbiology, quantum chemistry, material science, and theoretical physics were being recalled from their assignments across Mars to converge on Meridiani. The discovery was being classified at the highest levels, but Elena knew that within weeks, every person in every Martian colony would know something extraordinary had happened. Rumors already circulated through the underground corridors of the research station. Someone had found something ancient. Someone had found something impossible. The first geological analysis confirmed what Elena's instruments had initially suggested. The crystalline structures were not fossils. They were not the remains of biological organisms. They were solid, stable, and composed of matter that had been organized deliberately. The deepest samples came from strata dated to approximately 3 billion years old, the period when Mars still had liquid water on its surface, when the planet's magnetic field was still strong enough to protect the atmosphere from solar wind erosion. Something had existed during that era, Something had been constructed with precision that rivaled any technology humanity had developed in the 21st century. Dr. Marcus Webb arrived at Meridiani Station on the 4th day after the initial discovery. He was the chief of the Mars Geological Survey and had pioneered the deep drilling techniques that had made Elena's discovery possible. He was also notoriously skeptical of extraordinary claims, which is precisely why Elena respected him. If anyone could poke holes in her hypothesis, it would be Marcus. She watched as he moved through the laboratory, examining samples, reading through data logs, cross-referencing spectroscopic analyses. His expression remained neutral throughout, a mask of professional detachment that gave nothing away. By evening, Marcus sat across from Elena in the small observation lounge where the senior staff gathered to decompress. The Martian sunset had transformed the sky into shades of blue and purple, a phenomenon that still caught Elena off guard despite decades of living on Mars. The human eye perceived color differently under Martian atmospheric conditions, making sunsets here seem almost alien, almost supernatural. "I want to believe you, Marcus," said Elena, finally, his voice low and measured. "The data's compelling, but what you're suggesting is that Mars hosted an advanced civilization 3 billion years ago. That's not just a bold claim, Elena. That's a complete rewrite of everything we understand about planetary development." "I'm not suggesting anything about civilization. I'm suggesting that something organized, something deliberate existed here. Whether it was biological, mechanical, or something we don't have a framework to understand yet, I cannot say, but the evidence points to intentional construction." Marcus leaned back in his chair, his eyes distant. "If this becomes public before we have answers, it will destabilize the entire colonial structure. People came to Mars to build something new. They came to escape the limitations of Earth. If they learned that Mars might have hosted intelligent life, that we might not be the first, it changes the entire narrative. It changes why we're here." Elena nodded. She had considered this. The psychological and social implications of the discovery extended far beyond the science itself. Mars had been presented to settlers as a frontier, a blank slate waiting for human civilization to take root. The revelation that something had already grown here, something that had already been extinguished by cosmic forces, would force a reckoning with that narrative. "The samples are being analyzed now, and we should have more detailed compositional analysis within 48 hours. We need to understand what we're dealing with before we draw any conclusions." The analysis came back more confounding than Elena had anticipated. The crystalline structures were not merely minerals. They exhibited properties that suggested they could store and process information at the molecular level. The latticework contained variations, imperfections actually, that seemed to encode patterns of data, as if someone had written a message in stone itself, embedding information into the very molecular structure of the crystal matrix. The variations appeared at regular intervals, suggesting a repeating code or language of some kind. When Elena presented these findings to Marcus, she watched his skepticism give way to something she had rarely seen in him: genuine uncertainty. He stared at the data visualization, at the three-dimensional model of the crystal lattice with its intricate variations highlighted in contrasting colors. "This is impossible," he said softly. "This shouldn't exist." "And yet it does," Elena replied. "We have the samples, we have the data, we have photographs of the bore site before extraction. This is real, Marcus. The only question is what it means." The investigation expanded rapidly over the following weeks. Deep drilling teams were dispatched to 12 other sites across Mars, locations chosen strategically to represent different geological periods and regions. The pattern held. At depths between 15 and 20 kilometers, in strata dating between 2.8 and 3.2 billion years old, similar crystalline structures appeared in every borehead. They were not unique to one location. They were not anomalies. They were distributed across the planet in what appeared to be a deliberate pattern. When plotted in 3 dimensions, when overlaid against gravitational surveys and magnetic field data, a structure emerged. The crystalline formations were not random. They appeared to follow lines of longitude and latitude with precision that suggested intentional placement. They formed a grid, a network that covered the planet with mathematical regularity. Whatever constructed them had done so with purpose, with planning, with a kind of systematic approach that only intelligence could devise. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel to keep up with the most incredible discoveries about our neighboring planet. The message arrived at the Colonial Administration Center in Olympus City within hours. Elena had not wanted to alert anyone before she had concrete data, but protocol demanded immediate notification of any discovery with implications for colonial security or scientific governance. Director James Chen read the preliminary report 3 times, each time with increasing disbelief. The structure's latest team had found were not random geological formations. They exhibited mathematical properties consistent with artificial construction. The lattice patterns repeated at multiple scales, suggesting a fractal organization. In nature, fractals appeared in coastlines, in crystals, in the branching of rivers, but this was different. This was controlled, deliberate, engineered down to molecular precision. By the next morning, Elena's laboratory had become the nexus of a rapidly expanding investigation. Additional teams from the other major research stations were being mobilized.